children and parents. And before we get to this, let me just say this to you. Please give yourself some grace in these matters. If we all determine that we are successes in life or we are valuable in God's eyes because we've done well in these roles, then we just might walk out of here, all of us, feeling pretty low. I am a failure in so many ways, so please find yourself in my place too, and you determine not to have guilt over some of the things of your past. So even as we've been talking about marriage and parenting, if your marriage has been falling apart, if your family is struggling, if you were not the best husband, wife, father, mother, or child, please don't let the guilt eat you up. Just today, maybe accept some of God's grace to cover your past and begin again today where God has called you to be. And let's do better. I stopped at McDonald's last week for a biscuit and tea before I started my day, and I sat near another table where a father and daughter were talking. She was obviously a young teen, but old enough to know, old enough to have some responsibilities. They were having some issues at home because I could tell by the way the dad was talking. And they were just, I guess, a normal dad and teen daughter. I've seen it before, even in my own home. He was frustrated with her because she wasn't using her time wisely. She wasn't studying as much, but had lots of screen time on her phone. I wasn't trying to listen in. They were loud enough for me to hear it, so I was eating quietly, but they were loud enough for me to hear it. He told her that he'd given her lots of responsibilities, but she wasn't being responsible, so he was challenging her. He didn't raise his voice. She didn't raise hers either. It was calm, but passionate at times. And I couldn't help but hear and be sympathetic to both. I think they loved each other. But the issue was hard on both of them. He was doing the communicating. He was making his point. She was doing some disagreements. I didn't hear what she was saying. I don't know that she used many words. And I couldn't see her eyes. I could see his, but I figure she was rolling her eyes because the word she kept using was so. It didn't sound very respectful the way she said it. I think his arguments were frustrating her. I know her words were frustrating him because I could see his face. They did the talking before they started eating. Once they started eating, it all got cold because they were eating so their food didn't get cold. It was like a wall went up between them. Almost nothing was said after that. It was hard to watch or hear, but I appreciated it too because I think they're normal. We've had those talks in our family. You probably have too. Because we parents love our children. We really do. And we think we know what we're doing, even though in all honesty, we don't always know what we're doing, but we try. And we keep trying because God has given this responsibility to us. We're the parents. We submit to Him and we humbly lead our children. We confess, though, sometimes it's hard. Frustrating at times. We can be stubborn too, just like our kids can, but we do it out of love. Somebody has to do it, and God's given the job to us. It really isn't the church's job. It's not the school's job. Please don't ever say it's the government's job. They do a terrible job at it. It's our job as parents. It's our God-given responsibility, and we'd better take it seriously. So as Paul starts to write, listen to him, because he doesn't start with the job of the parents. He starts with the job of the children first. Listen, chapter 6, verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Notice that when Paul challenged the wives, if you were paying attention a couple weeks back, he appealed to their relationship to the Lord. When he challenged the husbands, he again pointed to the Lord as the example. And now as he tells the children to obey the parents, he intentionally uses the words "in the Lord." And that shouldn't surprise us Christians that everything in the New Testament keeps pointing to Jesus. Really, if you want a good marriage, a good family, a good long life, wonderful. I figure everybody wants that. But if you take this call to follow Jesus seriously and you intend to shape yourself and be shaped into the image of Jesus, then everything should be modeled after Him. Everything should start looking a lot more like Him than it does us. So even parents and children, look to the Lord for how you should do this. And why should children obey their parents? Well, simply put, it's right. It's the right thing to do. In all of this, it's about right and doing right and having a right relationship, which is called righteousness in the Scriptures. Then this is how God has designed families, and the parents are in charge, so children, obey your parents is just right to do. Kaufman says, there will never be a time when it is right for children to disregard, dishonor, and disobey their parents. It's important to point out the relationship where children are submitting to the parents. But again, just like we said with husbands and wives, it's not about superiority or value or worth. Just like God designed the husband to be the head of the wife, the father to be the role model and the leader in the home. It's not because he's somehow better, more qualified, more worthy. It's not about children being somehow inferior to their parents. Not in worth, not in God's eyes. But they need to know how the relationship must work, because sometime around the teenage years, they start thinking they're smarter than the parents. Maybe they'd say something like this, at least in their own heads. My parents appear to be stupid right about now. I think I could do a better job. I think I'm as smart as they are. Who do they think they are to tell me what to do? What? Does God like them more than me? I don't think so. Are they more valuable than me? Not at all. I think it's time for a change in the relationship from now on. I think I'll go my own way. The words don't always sound like but the attitude is familiar if you've ever raised teens. And honestly, you ought to hear this. Parents are not always the smartest ones in the room. Parents make mistakes. They're not perfect. They're not always the best parents. And even if they could do it all over again, they just might find themselves changing some things. I remember listening to Guy Dowd. He won National Teacher of the Year way back in 1986, and he was a very humble man who followed the Lord the best he could too. And he said, in the thing I listened to, he said, I don't know that I'm the best teacher in the nation or in the state or even in my city or even in my school. I just want to be the best teacher in my classroom. We parents will probably not be handed any awards for our parenting skills. I doubt anybody's going to recognize the ones in this room as being the best parents in the world. I think we parents would just like to be the best parents in our own home. Children, you can think whatever you want. You can really even say whatever you want in the home to the parents. As James Dobson says, as long as it's said with respect. But there's just one job you have. Children, there's one job you have. It's the first job and the biggest job, and it will last through all of your years. It's the job of obedience or submission or respect when it comes to your parents. Parents are not on a power trip, and if you parents are on a power trip, get off. The best parents I know are the humble ones who know they don't always know. They are the godly ones who honestly desire to raise their children to be more than successful or rich or healthy or good, but to be godly. And they're investing in their children's lives so that their children can inherit the greatest treasure ever, the kingdom of God. And what the Lord promises here to the children who do a good job of honoring their parents is long life or good life or blessed life. You see it in verse 3, but be careful how you read it. Be careful how you read it. It's not a guarantee, because if it were, Jesus himself would have died of old age. No, trouble comes to the best of kids as they grow up, and some kids don't live very long, even if they've been the best children ever. But generally speaking, those who obey, those who honor, those who respect their parents are going to do better in life and live longer and be blessed. Deuteronomy 21 paints a pretty sad picture. It's a scary one for children. It speaks to the Israelites living under the old law, and it says, if there's a rebellious son who does not obey his parents, do you know what they do in Deuteronomy 21? They bring the child, they bring the son before the elders. And then the men of the community for this rebellious, gluttonous drunkard of a son who will not obey, who will not listen, who will not submit. They bring that boy before the men of the community, and they all pick up stones and they stone him to death. Whew. And then it says, you must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear it and be afraid. Wow. See, God knows what every generation should know. If a child doesn't learn and practice obedience in the home, he or she will probably become a troublemaker for society and in the church and within his own family, for the whole world. Many of our troubles today could be cured maybe if parents would just discipline and love and train their children. And in turn, the children would honor, love, and obey their parents. Think of the number of lives that would have been saved had the perpetrator of our most recent crimes would just have been obedient children from the start, respecting the Lord enough to respect their parents. So I suspect this suspect in Deuteronomy 21, this rebellious one, it wasn't a one-time mistake. Oops, he messed up. Stone him. By the way, we don't even know his age. Would it shock you if he was 20 or 40 or 60? He didn't have a momentary lapse of judgment. He was persistently rebellious. You can see how he brought dishonor to the family and the whole community. Surely this is a last resort. The parents who have tried everything and can't get this arrogant, ignorant, sinful son to do what they ask, so they turn him over. And I don't know how often that would have happened, but I think it would have only needed to happen once to become powerful and effective. I mean, if I could tell all of you children, last week we killed a kid right here on the stage because he was disobedient, I think it would say something. It would be powerful. See, God made sure Israel knew this. The stability of the family is the foundation of a strong society. The stability of the family is the foundation of a strong society. And a grown-up learns the lessons as they are children under the care of their parents. And I wish our country understood this, because as the American family erodes around us, don't be surprised if the nation follows suit. I think the reason the story is told in Deuteronomy 21 is to teach Israel. Telling it should be enough to do the trick. Can you imagine the news spreading? You know what happened to Bob? He's dead. Can you imagine seeing it? The son who is dead, lying there in a bloody heap of lifeless flesh. The message then becomes powerful. We don't tolerate this. In my house, there were two things I remember very well. My parents loved me, and I was never in charge. I never forgot those two lessons. My parents loved me, and I was never in charge. And I feared the punishment of my parents early on. More than that, as I grew, I feared disappointing them. And my fear, which could have been seen as love, turned out to be fear, which could be seen as respect. As my fear of being punished decreased and my desire to please them increased. And it looks like this son in Deuteronomy 21 had neither the fear of punishment nor the deep desire to respect his parents. But the point that must be remembered here is this: God takes this seriously. This is not a joke. The obedience of children to their parents is important. Now, if these verses in Ephesians that we just read sounds good, but we don't know how practically they might look, then let me just give you some things that are found right here, I think. Children of all ages, honor and obey your parents. Obedience, I think, sounds differently in time. It changes in time. Maybe you could even say it fades over time as the child gets older. We may question what obedience to parents looks like when you are 40 and 50 and 60. But what you don't have to wonder is, what does respect and reverence and honor look like? Those never fade. In fact, I would say they grow in time as you become an adult. Hey, if you're a child today, and it doesn't matter how old you are, try this. Take some time to discover what honoring your parents should look like in your life. When you're young, it may be doing what they say when they first say it and not asking them to say it again and beg you to do it. It's doing your chores before they have to remind you, did you do your chores? As you get freedom, it may be checking in with them just so they know where you are and what you're doing and what time you'll be home and who you're hanging with. Tell them what they want to know before they have to ask you what they need to know. And then you grow into adulthood, and maybe it starts becoming like this, checking on them, seeing how they are doing. Remember the important dates in their life and the things they need to do. Remembering to call them or write them or visit them. Some things that you do not get old even as you do. Some things that always will be good no matter how old you get, I should say. Some things parents will always appreciate is talking. So listen. No matter how old you get, listen to your parents. Pay attention to their stories. Appreciate them and tell them that you appreciate them. Spend some time with them. Consider them. Remember them. And always tell them that you love them. Always tell them that you love them. Listen to your parents and learn from them. I may not get through to you young people this morning, but your parents know a lot about life. It may not seem like it from your point of view, but it's true. So listen when they talk. Pay attention to what they say. Learn the lessons they have already learned, and you may not have to learn them the hard way. Some of you may not be good at listening, so maybe you need to learn to listen better to your parents. I know you say you hear them, as my children do, but there's a difference between hearing and listening. If you think you have nothing to learn, you're not listening well enough. Be humble. Be humble enough to hear it, to listen to it, to learn it, and ask them about it. How about this? Have you ever asked your parents how they did when they were your age? I know they want to tell you, but have you ever asked them? Ask them how they dealt with their parents, how they chose their friends, what hard lessons they learned, how they struggled against temptation, trying to be holy, learning what it means to trust God, and holding on to faith when it was not easy. Ask them sometime. Let them tell you the stories of their childhood. Also, submit to them. The word submit isn't used here, but I keep going back to verse 21 because I think that sets the stage for everything after chapter 5, verse 21. And for a child, submitting is wrapped up in the words obey and honor. I think one of the faults of children as they get old enough to become smart is pride. Pride. I had it. I suspect you had it. Probably everyone does. It's natural and it's common, and it really reaches the point about the teen to college years when pride gets the best of us. You get to a point where you think, nobody can tell me I'm the smartest one in the room. I know you don't. Don't be surprised if you've got it now and don't even know you've got it. It's pride. You need to be humble. If you think you know it, you don't. And someday maybe you'll be embarrassed to find out you didn't back here when you thought you did. Be patient with your parents. Cut them some slack. Your parents, especially your single parent, is handling pressures you could never appreciate. So even if you don't understand what it's like to be in their shoes, give them some grace until you do understand. And also, how about this one? Forgive your parents. All of us parents need to be forgiven. This one's important, especially if you're older now. Even if your parents are dead now. It doesn't matter what they did. It might have been insignificant. It might have been devastating. But they need your forgiveness. And the sooner you learn to do that, the better off you'll be. Maybe the longer you'll live and the more blessed you'll be too. So turn it loose. Get rid of anger. Give it to God. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Today is a great day to forgive your parents no matter what. And also learn to appreciate them. Learn to appreciate them while you have them, because someday you won't. And many of us in the room can tell you, you one day may regret that you did not learn to appreciate them while you had them. Maybe it's true that none of us really appreciates our parents until we've laid them in the ground. Maybe. One of the last conversations I had with my dad before he died, he was laying in bed, I was kneeling beside him, and I told him he was the greatest man I'd ever known, and I appreciated so much him. And we talked about the end, because I was curious what he thought it might be like when he died. Neither one of us knew. He knows now. But I said, I love you, and he said, I love you, and this may be shocking to you, but I cried. He said, I just wanted to be a better man than my dad was to me. And I told him he was. And he said, I want you boys to be better men than me. And I told him I didn't think that was possible. But every really good parent wants that for their kids. We want our children to surpass us. I hope that my children become better people than their parents were. I desire for my girls to become more spiritual, more devoted to God, more in love with Jesus, more filled with the Spirit than either of their parents could have been. If one day you see my girls who are spiritually mature, wonderful Christian women who honor the Lord in everything, and I'm not around, you just remember how messed up their parents were. But if we did anything right, it will be pointing them to the Lord. Always pointing them to the Lord. And if your parents did that, then thank God for them. And if your parents didn't, then forgive them. And if you have not done a good job as a parent yourself, then take the grace of the past and let's determine to be better than we have been. Of all the things my parents did well, the one I always appreciate, they gave me faith. They showed me what it looks like. They showed me what it's like to live a life that honors the Lord. I've quoted this so often you may be tired of it, but John Wesley said, I learned more about Christianity from my mother than from all the theologians of England. And I agree. Parents are a gift from the Lord. And parents should know, children are a gift from the Lord. Raise them right. Raise them well. Teach them all about the Lord. Discipline them. Please discipline your children, especially you fathers. Don't make the moms do that. I believe it's your job to raise them to know the Lord. It's your job, dads. But it comes with a warning, verse 4. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So fathers and mothers too, train your kids. Teach them. Discipline them. But be careful how you do it. Don't be too harsh. Don't squash their spirit even as you attempt to stop the wrong behavior. And with lots of discipline, give lots and lots of love. Don't exasperate them. Don't frustrate them. Don't push them too hard where they despise you. Don't push them too far where they come out swinging. Don't push them too far that they turn to anger as a response. As a shepherd does with his sheep, the rod of discipline is also used for protection. It guides them. It rescues them. It leads them for their good. And that is exactly how the Lord does it with his children. And that is why it says, bring our children up in the training and instruction of the Lord, because he knows what is best. It always starts and ends with the Lord in every aspect of life, especially in parenting. It ought to be focused on the Lord. Parents, raise them in the Lord, and children of all ages, obey them in the Lord and honor them, your mother and your father. Just so you know, this disobedience thing that we sometimes giggle at, like, yeah, he's disobedient. The Lord doesn't giggle. It is seen as a sin against God. Even in the New Testament, read the end of Romans 1 or the beginning of 2 Timothy 3 and see what God thinks of those who disobey their parents, because it is not just sad, it is called sin. So don't think you can dishonor your parents and somehow in the same way honor God. You can't. Parents are not all-knowing, but they know a lot. They're not perfect, but they're experienced. They make mistakes, but they're still wise. And they may not be the best at showing it, but I think they really do love you. And if they love God, and if you love God, then parents, honor your children in how you raise them. And children, honor the Lord by honoring your own parents. And as usual, it often goes back to the Lord, pointing back to God. God is the perfect Father who loves and disciplines for His children's good. Sure, He punishes evildoers, but He disciplines with love His own children. So let me ask this as we close. Are you a child of His? Are you saved by the blood of His Son? Have you been forgiven? Do you have hope? Have you been washed? Are you adopted into His family today? If not, do what a few others have done. Be immersed into Christ. Find salvation in Him, because that is where it is only found, in Him. Let's stand and sing. Come if you need to.